you've learned throughout your life, taught to you by someone who was wise, whether it was street smart kind of stuff, kind of like the fatherly or grandfather maybe or grandmother, how to cook the thing, how to use the tool, those sorts of things. They help. They're awesome. Then there's also that sort of life advice that's not like a life hack. That's a popular term, life hack, which pretty much life hacks is a modern genre, is nothing new. It's helpful information that gets you from doing this thing that was very hard and shows you a really simple way of accomplishing the same end. One example, I just remember my grandpa's a really smart, he's a really smart man, but particularly, so he's a wise Christian, he's skillful with the Word of God, but I'm thinking at the moment of his skill in carpentry, because he's a good carpenter, and he understands how tools work and how to use the tool in the best way to accomplish the job that's necessary. And I remember working with a shovel one time, and I don't remember all of the details. I just remember being so astonished because he was, I must have been 15, 14 years old. So he seemed like an ancient, like don't grab the shovel, Grandpa, you'll break your back. He was totally in shape. And I think I was using a flathead shovel trying to pick up some stuff, and we were working together. And it was kind of a hard job. We had a lot of stuff to move. And I was trying to use a flathead shovel as though it were a spade. So I'm kind of trying to dig down, and I was being very inefficient. I was getting blisters. I'm sweating. I'm working really hard. And Grandpa came over and said, here, let me show you how to use it. And I was at first kind of like, what are you talking about? Show me how to use a shovel. Isn't it pretty evident? You put the stuff in the scoopy part and you lift it and move it where you want it. Like, come on, you don't need to teach me how to use a shovel. Until he showed me his technique of allowing the shovel to do the work and slipping it underneath. And though it was still work on his part and it still required lifting, it was like 80% less difficult than the way I was doing it. And it was just kind of astonishing to see Grandpa teach me how to use a shovel and how much wisdom I got from that in a practical sense. Well, we have been getting that kind of wisdom from the book of Proverbs. As a literary genre, we could group the book of Job, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes in their own little category called wisdom literature, we might call it. And they are interesting because they're all teaching wisdom, but they're all teaching it from a different angle. So Job is a narrative. This is a biography. This is, if you were in college and there were 3 classes and the degree was called wisdom, you would go to the class of Job and it would be like a history class. It would be, here is wisdom from a historical perspective. This is, you watch this man's life, you watch how everything played out. It was not what you expected. The common wisdom of the day by the friends of Job and even Job himself, all of it was usurped. God's wisdom is greater than man's wisdom. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, not education, not academics, not memorization, not information. It's go to God. That is where wisdom is sourced. And we learned that big lesson in the history class. But if you were getting the degree called wisdom, and there were 3 classes to take, the first class was Job, and that was a history class. The next class was Proverbs. And Proverbs is a very, how do you say it? It's an optimistic class. It kind of would resemble to me an art class or a class of poetry or speech, where it deals in the philosophical realm. It doesn't get actually specific. It doesn't make very calculated statements. It's more general. It's, these things, if you pursue wisdom, you'll generally have a great life. And if you don't pursue wisdom, you're going to die. Well, that is a very helpful, optimistic perspective, and we learn so much. Most people love the book of Proverbs. Most people do not really care for the book of Ecclesiastes. Why? Because it's the third class of wisdom, and this would be maybe an ethics sort of class, or this would be the teacher. Have you ever had a teacher in college or high school or whatever, who seemed to play the critic? They would present to you a scenario. I remember being in ethics, an ethics class, and the teacher, he more than giving us information, he challenged our preconceived ideas and notions. He would ask questions that by the end of the class you felt very unsettled. I mean, it's like your foundation of everything. Man, I thought I knew what was right and wrong, and now I'm so confused. Well, that's kind of the perspective. You're hearing from Solomon again. Solomon, who wrote the very cheery, bright, happy, optimistic, general book of Proverbs, writes the very dark, discouraged, critical, pessimistic book of Ecclesiastes. He gives us a new class, and he plays the critic. And so we have to understand the perspective here. The author, firstly, is the same author of Proverbs, and he's taking the reader, taking us on this wisdom journey, and he actually is trying to shake us up a little bit. So if you feel unsettled as you read the book of Ecclesiastes, I believe that is the point. So in Proverbs, it said, pursue wisdom, you'll be healthy. And don't pursue wisdom, and you'll be sick and die. Ecclesiastes says the same thing happens to the just and the unjust. Everybody goes through time. Everybody's life is short. Everybody gets rain on their head, whether they're good or bad. Everybody dies. I could go to parties and have a great time, or I could never be invited to a party and feel isolated from everybody else. Either way, we're all going to die. It's all vanity. So there. That's the book of Ecclesiastes, basically. Now, he gives us some hope at the end, but more or less, he invites us to this critical thinking class. And we've been excited by the history class of Job, and we've been inspired by the artistic, optimistic class of Proverbs. And now we're going to get challenged a little bit by the pessimistic, critical thinking class of Ecclesiastes. So are you ready? We're only going to spend 2 days in it. We're reading half the book today, half of the book tomorrow, and that's it. It's a small book. And so let's hear from the preacher, as he calls himself, in chapter 1 and verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now, preacher there was not the same idea as a preacher is today. A preacher today is more like a herald, a person who teaches, heralds out a truth, lifts up his voice as a trumpet. There's New Testament explanation of a preacher, a pastor. In this case, preacher would have been more like a historian, a person who's done research and is now presenting that work. So when he calls himself the preacher, he's not a pastor. This is not a pastor. He's actually a king. That's his job. But he's the wisest man who ever lived, and he's saying, listen up, I've done a lot of research. The way he introduces himself in the very first verse says, what I'm about to tell you comes at a high cost of study, of experience, of life. I'm giving you a digest of the very difficult experience that I have been through. I'm a preacher. I'm like a historian. I've studied it all. Here is my work. And so we benefit from the very long and hard and painful experience of Solomon as he writes down his takeaways. Verse 2, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. That's a Hebrew metaphor. The word vanity means smoke. Kind of like James says that your life is a vapor. Solomon explores small things and big things. He even explores astronomy, talking about how stars explode and planets change. Time seems to be, you can't pin it down. You can't even understand time. And he tries his best to make you understand how small you are, how little you are in the universe, how puny your perspective is, and frankly, how fragile life is. And he says everything, every single thing is like smoke. It looks like you can handle it. Your life seems like something that you've got a grip on, but frankly, as soon as you try to grab it, you've got no control. You have no control over whether tomorrow is a sunny day or a rainy day. No control over the fact that you are the height that you are. You can't make yourself taller. That's his perspective. Everything is smoke. Verse 3. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun? One generation passeth away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. All things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The thing that hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. He uses that phrase, under the sun, quite a lot. And so far, he's talking about the transient nature of everything and how you can't affect it. When he would sit down and look at a river, it bothered him. This thing is never satisfied. It's constantly flowing. There's always work, but it's always the same. Nothing's new, yet everything is laborious. And that made him feel powerless. It's like, when will something fresh happen? This river has been doing this for who knows how long, and it will never seem to stop. It just continues to do its thing. New water, but nothing is new. And I can't do anything about it. So, deep thoughts. But he really comes to the same conclusion that we all would have come to if we think this way. I am powerless to affect change. There's nothing fresh, and I am small. All is vanity. I'm out of control. Verse 10, Is there anything whereof it may be said, See, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. So history is always forgotten. The details, the motives, so much is forgotten. So what's the big deal if I'm a good person or a bad person? Nobody will remember me. Verse 12, I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. And I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. I communed with mine own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I gave my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. So that's an interesting thing that he brings up. He includes wisdom, the greatest gift that God gave him, and the greatest gift that we could all pursue. He concludes that it also is in the category of vanity. His life has not been all that happy. I mean, he's had a lot of cool stuff, but he truly isn't satisfied. He's not satisfied. And he had more wisdom than anybody in the world. And he says, wisdom in and of itself is not strong enough to make one happy and satisfied and to bring meaning to everything. Just wisdom. See, Solomon has arrived at the same conclusion that Adam and Eve arrived at the moment their teeth broke the skin of that fruit. The knowledge of good and evil. What was the enticing words of Satan. It was, this will make you wise. God just doesn't want you to be wise. You take this fruit and you will be wise, and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. And so the temptation here, the enticement, was wisdom. And the first experience of this wisdom that Adam and Eve had was negative. When they had this new revelation and their eyes were opened, what was the first thing that they noticed? They noticed that they were shameful. They noticed that they needed to cover themselves up. They ended up not trusting one another, so they had to cover themselves to protect themselves. And they started hiding from God. In other words, that's why Solomon said in Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's all about your relationship with God. So Adam and Eve forsook that relationship, that daily walking by God's side, and said, I'm going to define what's right and wrong on my own terms. So they chose wisdom over the source of wisdom, and they were not satisfied by it, and we've all been affected dramatically by that decision. And so Solomon gets to the tree, parabolically as well. And God gives him wisdom, and instead of choosing to walk with God and benefit by that deep wisdom, only sensible by walking with the source of wisdom, he decides to take that wisdom and use it for his own purposes and means. And he says, that didn't satisfy me. Very interesting. Chapter 2. I said in mine heart, go to now. I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do unto the heaven all the days of their life. Nothing's doing the trick for him. I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water to water therewith, the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle, above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. I gat me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men, as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great, and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatsoever mine eyes desired I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. And I turned myself to behold wisdom, and madness, and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king? Even that which hath been already done. Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. They both die. 10 out of 10 people die. So what's the benefit of being wise, or what's the problem with being foolish? You're going to die, so. Verse 15, then said I in my heart, as it happeneth to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. The wisest man who ever lived is struggling with the fact that the foolish people, the lewd fellows of the baser sort, to use Paul's description, have the same thing happen to them as what's going to happen to him. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever, seeing that which now is and the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. Somebody else is going to sit in my chair. So why did I bother making the chair so nice? I'm just not going to be able to sit in it for eternity. So, blah. Verse 19, and who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor, wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom, and in knowledge, and in equity. Yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity, and a great evil. For what hath man of all his labor, and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can hasten hereunto more than I? For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight wisdom, and knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. Chapter 3. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to rend, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time to war, and a time of peace. What profit hath he that worketh in that wherein he laboureth? I have seen the travail which God hath given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. He hath made everything beautiful in his time. Also he has set the world in their heart, so that no man can find out the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end. I know that there is no good in them, but for a man to rejoice and to do good in his life. He's concluding that it is still what he ought to do. He knows what's true, even though he's struggling with this turmoil and his vexation of spirit, because he feels like, pursuing wisdom and doing righteousness isn't worthwhile because we're all going to die. Solomon's eschatology isn't super strong. It's not as strong as Job's was. Job knew, he believed that his Redeemer lived. He believed that he will see peace in his latter end. I can't remember his language, but Job even believed in resurrection. He believed that there was afterlife. Solomon right now is only looking at things under the sun. He's not looking at things beyond earth, beyond death. But he is concluding, by the way, in those awesome verses that we read at the beginning of chapter 3, the time for this, the time for that, he's kind of pointing out, like, it feels like life is this big charade. You just kind of like going through, okay, it's a funeral. Okay, so let's put on the dark clothes and let's put a sad face on. The fact of the matter is everybody dies. So why is a funeral so big of a deal? I mean, it's very ordinary, actually. Like, every person dies. Why are we making such a big deal out of this moment? Or there's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry, time to sow, time to rend, time to hate, time to love, time to embrace, time to refrain from embracing. So, like, it's just all this, you just kind of do it. And he's struggling to know why any of it's important. But he has decided that it's still what he's going to do, or what should be done, is to do good. And he said, but for a man to rejoice and to do good in his life. Verse 13. And also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. So he's still promoting righteousness. He's still saying the gifts of God are still good. He's just struggling with the fact that they're temporary. 14. I know that whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taketh from it, and God doeth it, that men should fear before him. That which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been, and God requireth that which is past. And moreover I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there. I said in mine heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. I said in mine heart concerning the estate of the sons of men, that God might manifest them, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts. Every one thing befalleth them. As the one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. All go unto one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth? Wherefore I perceive that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, for that is his portion. For who shall bring him to see what he shall be after him, or what shall be after him? Chapter 4. So I returned, and considered all the oppressions that are done under the sun. And behold, the tears of such as were oppressed, and they had no comforter. And on the side of their oppressors there was power, but they had no comforter. Wherefore I praised the dead which are already dead, more than the living which are yet alive. Yea, better is he than both they, which hath not yet been, who hath not seen the evil work that is done under the sun. Again, I considered all travail and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. The fool foldeth his hands together, and eateth his own flesh. Better is an handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. Then I returned, and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone, and there is not a second. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother, yet is there no end of all his labor. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches, neither saith he, For whom do I labor, and bereave my soul of good? This is also vanity, yea, it is a sore travail. The rat race, even single people who have no family to provide for, and they don't necessarily, they just seem to work themselves to the bone, even though they're not providing an inheritance for people after them. They're not providing for the people in their life because they're alone, and yet they're still just trying to amass riches. It's like an ant just gathering pounds and pounds of food that it could never consume all of it, and yet he's just working his whole life. It's kind of observing a single person who's just amassing all of this stuff but never enjoying the good that it could offer him, just his whole life, just working himself to death and never actually enjoying the good and the profit of his labor. And it's just vanity. Why are you doing that? Verse 9, 2 are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. Again, if two lie together, then they have heat, but how can one be warm alone? So at least if you've got more people in your life, your labor has some meaning because you're providing for them. You're benefiting from their labor, and they're benefiting from yours. That's just kind of the idea he's saying. And if one prevail against him, two shall not withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Better is a poor and a wise child than an old and foolish king, who will no more be admonished. For out of prison he cometh to reign, whereas also he that is born in his kingdom becometh poor. I considered all the living which walk under the sun, with the second child that shall stand up in his stead. There is no end of all the people, even of all them that have, of all that have been before them. They also shall come after. They also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and vexation of spirit. Chapter 5. Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools, for they consider not that they do evil. Be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God, for God is in heaven, and thou upon earth. Therefore let thy words be few. That is such great advice. Verse 3, For a dream cometh through the multitude of business, and a fool's voice is known by multitude of words. When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better is it that thou shouldest not vow, than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Jesus actually referenced this portion of Scripture when he was instructing people, look, just don't vow, don't curse, don't vow, don't make oaths. Book of Hebrews also brings this up. It's just dangerous. When you make promises, you don't actually have any guarantee that you can fulfill it. Even if you think you can, you may die. I mean, you could have a heart attack right after making a promise. Even the simplest of saying, son, I'm going to take you to the park after work. Well, you have really not much control over what happens, so just be careful with the vows you make. It's not wrong to make a vow, but you ought to just be really careful about it. And if you make a vow, you better make good on it. Verse 6, suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin, neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice and destroy the work of thine hands? For in the multitude of dreams and many words there are also diverse vanities, but fear thou God. If thou seest the oppression of the poor, and violent perverting of judgment and justice in a province, marvel not at the matter, for he that is higher than the highest regardeth, and there be higher than they. Moreover, the profit of the earth is for all. The king himself is served by the field. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. When goods increase, they are increased that eat them. And what good is there to the owners thereof, saving the beholding of them with their eyes? The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eat little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not suffer him to sleep. There is a sore evil which I have seen under the sun, namely, riches kept for the owners thereof to their hurt. But those riches perish by evil travail, and he begetteth a son, and there is nothing in his hand. As he came forth of his mother's womb, naked shall he return to go as he came, and shall take nothing of his labor, which he may carry away in his hand. And this also is a sore evil, that in all points as he came, so shall he go. And what profit hath he that laboreth for the wind? All his days also he eateth in darkness, and he hath much sorrow and wrath with his sickness. Behold, that which I have seen, it is good and comely for one to eat and to drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor that he taketh under the sun, all the days of his life, which God giveth him, for it is his portion. Every man also to whom God hath given riches and wealth, and hath given him power to eat thereof, and to take his portion, and to rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he shall not much remember the days of his life, because God answereth him in the joy of his heart. There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, chapter 6, and it is common among men. A man to whom God hath given riches, wealth, and honor, so that he wanteth nothing for his soul of all that he desireth, yet God giveth him not power to eat thereof, but a stranger eateth it. This is vanity, and is an evil disease. If a man beget 100 children, and live many years, so that the days of his years be many, and his soul be not filled with good, and also that he have no burial, I say that an untimely birth is better than he. For he cometh in with vanity, and departeth in darkness, and his name shall be covered with darkness. Moreover, he hath not seen the sun, nor knoweth anything. This hath more rest than the other. Yea, though he live 1,000 years twice told, yet hath he seen no good. Do not all go to one place? All the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the appetite is not filled. For what hath the wise more than the fool? What hath the poor, that knoweth to walk before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the desire. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. That which hath been is named already, and it is known that it is man, neither may he contend with him that is mightier than he. Seeing there be many things that increase vanity, what is man the better? For who knoweth what is good for man in his life, all the days of his vain life which he spendeth as a shadow? For who can tell a man what shall be after him under the sun? Nobody knows the future. Wow. Some, I think, disturbing conclusions, some difficult things that he has to say. They're true. And I want to get to the conclusion, but I won't. And I think what we're invited to do in the book of Ecclesiastes is to sort of dwell in the discouragement of his words, to let them affect us, to let them be the ethics teacher who asks the crazy ethical question that unsettles the whole class, but doesn't necessarily give the conclusion and lets the class sit in the frustration and the confusion even, because that is when searching happens. That's where we really begin to think, I don't understand what was just said. You mean that if I do right, it really doesn't profit? I mean, does it not? He gives us some shimmers of hope, but not a lot. He says, to be clear, you should still do what's right. And there are gifts of God. And the increase of the field is a gift from God. And he's not fully saying nothing matters. He's just saying that nothing matters all that much. So what if your field is bountiful? You're going to eat from it, you're going to profit from it, but you're going to get hungry again, and the money's going to dry up, and you're going to need another good harvest next year in order to survive. So, I mean, it's kind of cool, but it's also like we're all going to die at some point. So, he's trying to get us to a point where we realize that everything physical, everything that's material, including us, is going to pass. Everything is in the process of transition. And the only thing that's eternal is God. And so his conclusion is the only thing that matters is to pursue God. So, there I said it. Oh, I can't. I'm just one of those, I have to have conclusion. I have to have reconciliation. But anyway, that's the idea of Ecclesiastes. It's not a different truth. It's just a different angle on the truth of Proverbs and Job. It's the other side of the Proverbs coin, saying, look, the fear of the Lord is the beginning. It really is the most important thing. Because if you get wisdom and you divorce that from pursuing God, look what happens. Look how discouraged he got. Nothing brought him happiness. Wives, money, success, friendship, parties, accolades, trophies, giving up on wisdom and just like, so, all right, let's do the folly thing. Maybe the folly thing really is satisfying at least. Maybe I'll just be a fool for a while and just see if that makes me happy. None of it worked. And so the preacher, at the end of this long hike, comes down to base camp and warns us, don't go down that path. It's just not worth it. Don't do this thing. Just pursue God. That's all that matters. That's the only way you'll be satisfied. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this truth. I pray that we would let it unsettle us. Oh, Lord, we strive to get a retirement fund. And we just really try to make good plans. If anything, 2020 has brought many people to the conclusions of Solomon. Why was I working so hard? Why did I do that? I mean, I invested all that money and then the stock market, my investments were gone. And Lord, just to be frank, there are benefits of pursuing wisdom and living righteously, but I could fall down and break my arm today. And we live in a fallen world and things don't operate the way they ought to. And all creation is groaning like a woman in travail. And there's shimmers of hope and moments of happiness and brightness, but mostly it's pain and darkness and shadows and mostly vanity, and it all vanishes away except you. So Lord, may we understand and come to the perspective that Solomon came to before going down all of the paths that Solomon went down to come to his conclusion. May we just trust his word that the fear of the Lord is the most important thing. I pray that you bless the service today. In Jesus' name, amen. I will see you guys at 11 o'clock. Again, no 9 a.m. service today. 11 o'clock, it'll be live streamed, and then we'll be in person. I'm looking forward to it. I'll see you guys then. 6 p.m. as well tonight. We continue our new series online on our live stream of 1 Corinthians 13, A Different Kind of Love. We've got some great things in store for that, following that would be our fellowship group. So packed day, an awesome day in the church. So be in prayer.